We live in interesting times. Today's stories. Brazil taps $8 billion for small businesses hit by COVID-19. Colombians complain about the rise in food prices during coronavirus outbreak. New York plans more hospitals as virus death toll surges. Canadian citizens stranded in Peru head back home. TRUDEAU leads Canadian celebrities in pandemic plea to stay home. Retired astronaut Chris Hadfield shares tips for self-isolation. Canadian government adds restriction and hopes to flatten the curve. And Indonesian volcano spews massive ash cloud. I'm Arnie Aquino with Eagle News, broadcasting from our Vancouver, Canada studio, bringing you stories from around the globe. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro said that the government will extend 40 billion reals, nearly $8 billion, in low-interest loans to small businesses hit by the coronavirus pandemic. Small and medium-sized businesses hit by COVID-19 containment measures will be able to take out loans at 3.75% interest, well below the market rate of around 20%, to cover 2 months of salary for their employees, provided they make no layoffs during that time.
Entre as medidas já anunciadas pelo governo, de modo que nós possamos atender as possíveis vítimas do coronavírus, também uma preocupação em manter os empregos. A gente costuma falar na segunda onda. Nós devemos, o máximo possível, diminuir a altura dessas duas ondas. E elas caminham simultaneamente.
The government estimates the program will benefit 1.4 million companies and 12.2 million workers. The measure comes after Brazil's lower house had previously passed a bill to make direct payments of around $120 to all Brazilians who work in the informal sector or are unemployed, seeking to cushion the blow of the COVID-19 crisis.
O programa financia 2 meses de folha de pagamento e o montante será de 20 bilhões por mês. 2 meses, 40 bilhões. O dinheiro vai direto para as folhas de pagamento. Então a empresa fecha o contrato com o banco, mas o dinheiro vai direto para o funcionário. O dinheiro vai cair direto no CPF do funcionário.
That was 3 times the Bolsonaro administration's initial proposal. Bolsonaro had faced criticism for his handling of the new coronavirus, which he compared to a little flu. He has repeatedly condemned scorched earth containment measures by local authorities, such as closing businesses and schools, which he warns is wreaking havoc on Latin America's biggest economy. He issued an online call for drivers to take to the streets and protest against such social distancing measures with the slogan, "The people want to work." However, only around 20 drivers took part in the first such protest in Sao Paulo, the economic capital and epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in Brazil. Residents of Colombia's capital complain that food prices have increased sharply since the lockdown was put in effect to stop the spread of the new coronavirus, with many calling on the government to regulate supermarket prices.
Los precios han incrementado mucho, han incrementado muchísimo. Entonces el gobierno tiene que estar como supervisando las tiendas de barrio y eso para tener un mejor control, ¿no? La verdad hay gente que no cumple como los requisitos, ¿no? Salen 2, 3 personas y no me parece, debería ser más aislamiento, o sea, menos gente en la calle, para que esto no se riegue más.
Lastimosamente sí se ve un alza en los precios. Antes con 100.000 pesos podía realizar varias compras y ahorita se llevan muy pocos productos por el mismo valor.
Por eso es que la gente se bota a las calles, porque es que una cosa es decir encerrémonos 15 días, pero las personas que no tienen con qué van a comer.
New York's coronavirus death toll continues to significantly rise, according to the state's governor, who announced plans to set up 4 more temporary hospitals to cope with the deluge of patients. Governor Andrew Cuomo said they were seeing a significant increase in deaths because the length of time people are on the ventilator is increasing, and the more it increases, the higher the level of deaths will increase. The governor also said that they expect that it will continue to increase. It's bad news, it's tragic news, it's the worst news, but it is not unexpected news either. The United States, where 40% of Americans are under lockdown orders, emerged as the epicenter of the pandemic this week, with new infections soaring and unemployment claims catapulting to a historic high. Cuomo says the hospitalization rate in his state, which was once doubling every 2.5 days, had slowed to doubling approximately every 4 days. There is good news that the rate of the increase is slowing, he said. Cuomo announced the creation of 4 temporary hospitals in large facilities in each borough, including at a horse racing track in Queens, in the model of an already constructed space in Manhattan's Javits Center. A Navy hospital ship with 1,000 beds and 1,200 medical staff is set to arrive on Monday. The governor projected the coronavirus spread could peak in New York in 21 days and said schools would remain closed until at least April 15. Cuomo praised Army Corps of Engineers personnel tasked with converting spaces, including convention centers, dormitories, and hotels for medical use, calling the virus an invisible beast. Still to come, Canadian citizens stranded in Peru head back home. Trudeau leads Canadian celebrities in pandemic plea to stay home. Retired astronaut Chris Hadfield shares tips for self-isolation. Canadian government adds restriction in hopes to flatten the curve. And Indonesian volcano spews massive ash cloud. This is Eagle News. You're watching Eagle News. I'm Marnie Aquino. Canadian citizens stranded in Peru gather at the Canadian Embassy in Lima to board buses headed to the military airport in order to head back home after the country closes borders due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
De manera que en estos momentos estamos ya inscritos para podernos ir a Canadá. Y pues algo que no aceptamos son los 1,400 de pasaje que tenemos que pagar cada uno. Pero de todas maneras estamos contentos por un lado porque nos vamos a nuestro lugar donde están nuestros hijos, nietos, bisnietos. Y por otro lado triste porque aquí también queda la familia, ¿verdad?
Vinimos para hacer turismo hace aproximadamente 2 semanas. Cuando llegamos a la ciudad del Cusco, lamentablemente escuchamos las noticias del presidente Vizcarra. Tengo bien entendido que las personas con discapacidad y seniors están tomando el primer bus y solamente esperando con mi familia poder abordar y poder llegar a casa a salvo.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's online plea for people to stay home during the coronavirus pandemic has gone viral, with actor Ryan Reynolds, musician Michael Bublé, and other Canadian celebrities on Tuesday helping to spread the word.
Hey everyone, I need your help. I need you to share this with everybody you know. COVID-19 is hitting hard all around the world and right across the country. Everyone needs to step up to fight against this virus, to keep our loved ones safe, to keep vulnerable people safe, and to protect the healthcare workers who are working so hard to keep us all safe. So listen to the advice of experts. Wash your hands frequently and for 20 seconds. Stay home and keep 2 meters apart and don't gather in groups. If you've not yet been following this advice, now is the time to do so before it's too late. Now is not the time to be hanging out in parks with friends or hosting dinner parties. If we all step up and do the right thing, we will get through this together. So help me spread the word and let's plank the curve.
In the 1-minute video, the Prime Minister looks tired and a bit disheveled as he speaks to the nation from his kitchen in his second week of self-isolation with his family after his wife Sophie was diagnosed with the COVID-19 virus.
Hello, everyone.
It was part of a massive advertising blitz to hammer home public health messaging to social distance in an effort to stem the spread of this virus. COVID-19 is hitting hard all around the world and right across the country, Trudeau says in the video posted on Twitter and watched by more than 1.2 million people and shared by 18,000 as of 1400 GMT. Canada's two most populous provinces, Ontario and Quebec, ordered the closures of all non-essential businesses. Speaking from confinement with his family in Canada, retired astronaut Chris Hadfield shares some tips from his 20-year training and 5-month stretch of self-isolation as commander on board the International Space Station, some of which he has published in a book, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. Active on social media, Hadfield has already published a short YouTube video with advice including have a mission and stay calm by becoming an expert on whatever makes you fearful.
I've been in isolation many times. I lived at the bottom of the ocean for a while on a little habitat, and I've lived in space 3 times. But my longest time away was commanding and living aboard the International Space Station. I was in space for about 5 months. I'm watching how this pandemic is influencing the group dynamic and how people are feeling. And I feel, as one of many people with a public voice, that it's important then to try and recognize that and help people recognize it also. Try and give people some tools to deal with it. To be isolated for a long time can be sort of frightening because you don't know what to expect. And whenever I'm frightened, I try and really dig into the actual risks, the actual dangers, become expert on the thing that is scaring me. And that helps me deal with my natural fear. In your little spaceship, your individual actions are magnified because you're a more significant part of the population. So recognizing that and seeing it and being much more cognizant of your own influence and your own impact is a key part of group psychological health. Deliberately go out of your way to do things that improve the chances of the whole crew not only succeeding, but feeling better psychologically and physically. Ease each other's burden. And then maybe the last part is be a little more self-analytical. If you notice that every other person in your expedition is behaving like a jerk, if they're all behaving like jerks, then it's probably you that's the jerk. We do Arctic survival and desert survival, and we live in a habitat under the ocean, and we spend hours in very confined quarters operating complicated equipment. And we work with psychiatrists and psychologists so that we both encourage and train for good behaviors that will allow a small group of people to thrive. So your heart gets smaller and your bones degrade and your muscles waste away. So we have to exercise deliberately and hard in order to be healthy when we get back to Earth at the end of a 6-month isolation. So we have some equipment on board, but it's pretty basic stuff. We have a bicycle, a stationary bicycle with no seat, because you don't need a seat without gravity. And we have a treadmill with big elastics that hold us down so we don't float away. And we have a resistive exercise machine. But anybody, anywhere, because we have gravity, you can always lift weights. And your body is a pretty good weight. You don't have to go to a gym to stay in shape. Gyms are more social than they are anything. In any small confined space, just find a bunch of clever ways to lift your own weight. Do push-ups, do sit-ups, do jumping jacks.
Canadians are finding life more restrictive as governments wage war against the spread of COVID-19. As Eagle News correspondent Thomas I. Likeness tells us, the list of prohibitions continues to grow.
Across Canada, more than 7,500 cases of COVID-19 have been reported. The infection has claimed more than 65 lives. Public health officials and various levels of government in Canada are focusing their efforts on containing the virus that is now being spread mostly by community transmission. 2/3 of the cases have been linked to community transmission. This is when the virus passes through an area and does not come from someone who has traveled or has been in contact with a traveler. The problem here is that it's difficult to identify who is carrying the disease and who isn't. As a result, we don't know how widespread it is. COVID-19 has virtually shut down the country. In most provinces, non-essential businesses have been closed. People have been told to stay home. Large gatherings are not allowed. The government is telling religious and cultural leaders that they must make alternate arrangements for several upcoming events, and people are being told not to have large celebrations with their families. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, has this advice.
The best thing we can do is stay close to home, and I know that there's several holidays coming up for different faith traditions, and typically those holidays are accompanied by large family gatherings and sharing that celebration together. And I would ask people to consider, not even beyond that, I would ask people to plan to celebrate those holidays remotely with family and not physically together. This is the time to stay close to home.
One sector of society that is really hurting is charitable giving. These organizations help the underprivileged, the homeless, the poor, and seniors. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has urged people who can afford it to remember the less fortunate in their communities.
And if you're fortunate enough to have a little extra to spare right now, I'm asking you to join in and be part of the solution. Please donate to your favorite organization or find out how you can volunteer in your community.
When is all this going to end? Some were saying in weeks, but now the consensus seems to be it'll be a few months. In Edmonton, Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Hi there, this is Raza Mangilit, and I am reporting from Toronto, Canada. Here are the latest updates in regards to the COVID-19 crisis. In Canada, there are about 6,300 confirmed cases and 66 deaths. Here in Ontario, there are 1,355 confirmed cases and 23 deaths as of today. Also, it's been reported at Bobcaygeon, a small town in Kawartha Lakes here in Ontario, 9 residents of a long-term care home facility have died today. 3 more residents and 14 staff members of this facility have also tested positive for COVID-19. This tragedy has given attention as to how Ontario can protect its senior citizens who are considered as most vulnerable to this virus. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stated in his press conference today that about 10,000 people are getting tested each day in Canada as the virus evolves, and so does Canada's swift response to help support its citizens. The Prime Minister also announced today that the employment insurance and emergency support benefits are now combined into what is called the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which will provide $2,000 a month for 4 months for those who have lost jobs at this time of crisis. He said that Canadians will receive this assistance 10 days after applying for this benefit. Premier Ford emphasized the importance of everyone's support in slowing down and buying the province of Ontario more time to help control the surge and ease the pressure of our hospitals. He expressed disappointment that this past weekend, a good number of people were still out in streets, socializing. Premier Ford urged everyone to reconsider and change their habits to help protect themselves, their families, and their communities. Premier Ford expressed that every hour, every day, every second of the day that people stay home, they are helping ease the pressure off the healthcare system. He strongly reminded that staying home saves lives. In Toronto, Raza Mangilit, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Up next, Indonesian volcano spews massive ash cloud. You're watching Eagle News. This is Eagle News. I'm Marnie Aquino. Indonesia's most active volcano, Mount Merapi, erupted, shooting a column of ash some 5,000 meters into the air in its second major eruption this month. Ash and sand covered areas several kilometers away from the peak of the rumbling crater near Indonesia's cultural capital, Yogyakarta. But authorities did not raise Merapi's alert level. There had been no reports of damage from the eruption. We urge people to stay calm and not panic. National and Disaster Mitigation Agency spokeswoman Agus Wibowo said, Merapi erupted earlier this month, shooting a massive ash cloud some 6,000 meters in the air. That eruption coated Yogyakarta and neighboring city Solo with gray dust and forced an airport closure. Mount Merapi's last major eruption in 2010 killed more than 300 people and forced the evacuation of 280,000 residents. That was Merapi's most powerful eruption since 1930, which killed around 1,300 people, while another explosion in 1994 took about 60 lives. The Southeast Asian nation, an archipelago of more than 17,000 islands and islets, has nearly 130 active volcanoes. It sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, a vast zone of geological instability where the collision of tectonic plates causes frequent quakes and major volcanic activity. That is this week's Eagle News. Join us next week for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/EagleNews and on Facebook at facebook.com/EagleNews. Thank you for watching. I am Arnie Aquino. We live in interesting times.